Bandwidth for this podcast is brought to you by Ideate Software. Be sure to check out all of their great Revit applications designed to increase your productivity. I will start the recording so that you, the listener, who's downloaded or streamed or watching this on YouTube, can hear us talk about BIM thoughts. That's right, we have a YouTube channel. Did you know that? You should subscribe to our YouTube channel. So please, pause this podcast, do that now, and then come right back. We're not going to wait because you're going to pause.
And if nothing else, you'll get like our faces in your regular YouTube feed. And who doesn't want that?
Who knows?
I'm just saying. Carl's happy face always puts a smile on mine.
That's right. He puts on a happy face, doesn't he?
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't look anything like a Canadian.
Hard to tell.
And that little laugh you heard is Adam
Sheather.
Adam Sheather.
Sheather joining us today. Adam, how the heck are you?
Good. Very good, thank you. Yeah, I just got back on holiday, so yeah, it was nice.
Well, that sounds fun. So, define yourself.
Curious. Always curious. I think that's about it.
Always curious. Really?
It's a good definition. I like that. I'd hire you.
Just based on that?
Yeah.
Okay.
I can do other things as well.
What do you like to do outside of the job, outside of getting paid?
I don't get to do too much outside of getting paid, but
where'd you go on holiday?
Well, holiday was good. We went to a island just off of Australia here, and we watched turtle hatchlings. Right now it's turtle hatchlings. So we saw thousands.
It's amazing.
Yeah, it was really cool. So it's a full nature and university sort of research group. They have PhD people from all over the world monitoring coral and global climate change, and we got to do tours of all that, and then we got to do a ton of snorkeling and a bit of shipwrecks and turtles, sharks, and rays.
Wow, that sounds fantastic. How long?
It was really good. 5 days.
And it's not too far from where you live?
No, from door to door, it's about 7-hour commute, so a flight and then a boat trip, and then you're there.
Wow.
I would take that over my 7-hour commute to New York any day.
Is that all it takes, is 7 hours to get to New York?
Well, it depends on how you get there, right? I mean, and what time of day. If you're driving there on 95 traffic, then yeah, you can plan a good 7-hour trip.
Ouch.
So
are you working from home these days?
I was until the start of the year, and we've been quite fortunate during this whole pandemic that we've become really, really busy. So we've just brought on 2 new staff, which for us in Australia is pretty big. We've grown by 30% roughly, so 4 to 6 full-timers here. So due to that, I've had to come into the office to help everyone get on board. So it's a bit different here. We have, I think, in total right now 13 cases, but that's in another state. I think we've had about 6 cases in my state since last June or July. So it's mostly back to normal around here.
And traveling locally, so
yeah, as long as you
travel restrictions, yeah, I'd assume so. Probably hard to get in and out.
Oh, yeah, you've got to quarantine for your 2 weeks and all of that sort of thing. Like on our flight, we still had to wear masks in the airport and on the plane, even though there hasn't been anything, just in case,
So in the BIM world, speaking of the fact that you don't have much time outside of work, tell us about all these things you do, because they are all very fascinating.
Oh, I guess there's a few things. First off, I'm part of the Bad Monkeys with Havad and Conrad and everyone else. So we sort of formed way back in the day when we were all trying to figure out Dynamo. And then at the time, there wasn't too many others. So we became a Facebook group and then became a sort of coordinated group of affiliates. And now everyone's sort of grown up and got their own businesses. Havard's just started Reope in Oslo, and we've got Autonomation here that's been running for a couple of years. So that mostly handles, I guess, our computational efforts. And then specifically in Australia, we've done a lot of work focusing on larger enterprise application development around Forge and Autodesk products. So smaller stuff would just be little add-ons in Revit. Our biggest stuff at the moment, we just integrated 10 manufacturing plants in the US with Revit, and then integrated that with Forge and a whole bunch of other microservices around mechanical subcontracting. And then in between all that, we managed to build BimBeats about 2 years ago, out of a couple of company projects, and then we manage and maintain that. So I just finished a implementation just before I went on holidays for a group in Vietnam, actually. So yeah, so it keeps us busy.
So what is this BimBeats? I haven't heard of BimBeats yet, so shame on me.
Oh, that's okay. We suck at marketing. We're all products and technical nerds. So we did the usual failure where you're like, hey, let's build this really cool thing. And then we realize that people don't just come because you build it. That's a myth. Might work with buildings and baseball fields, but it doesn't work with software. So BimBeats is something that spawned out of a project a couple of years ago where a couple of companies asked us to start harvesting Revit journal data and a bit of data around Revit. So we ended up building a couple of different approaches to grab and I guess create data pipelines for that information, store it in a database and start analyzing it. And at the same time, Conrad had been working with HOK on a product called Mission Control, which is open source and on GitHub. And we sort of were looking at what was the crossover between the ideas there. And we got to a consensus where what we wanted to focus on, there's a lot of tools out there that analytics around Power BI and stuff that do a heck of a lot of great stuff around projects. So, counting quantities and 4D methodology, and there's all sorts of stuff around project health. And we were really focused on the organizational health, I guess you'd call it. So what are the people doing? When you go to training, are they taking up the training? Are they using all these new tools? When you buy the tools, are they being adopted? Things like that. So we started building essentially data pipelines for Revit and for CAD and IFC and all sorts. There's a lot of pipelines we've got now. And essentially compiling all that data in real time. So a lot of these other tools we found were collecting data where you sort of have to hit a button, you process and you wait, and then you might save it to Excel or CSV, and then someone copies all those somewhere else. And there's a whole lot of, I guess, manual work. So we just automated all of that. So by default, BimBeats just pipelines every user's data to a central database that's stored by the client in either the cloud or on their virtual or actual hardware, if that's their preference, and then they can start analyzing that to better understand the organizational uptake of software and what softwares are even being used.
Well, and it looks like you guys cover a lot of bases. Would you say that there's maybe some things that are like maybe the top 5 things that you get kind of tasked to do or maybe want resources for?
Yeah, the hardest part with what we offer is we have so many data points around each of those softwares. So I know we're up around a couple of thousand. So anyone new that comes on board and starts looking at it just gets inundated and a bit scared, because everyone's focusing on different things. The top 5, I would say, mostly come around what we deal with, I guess, from customers. So probably some of the key ones are things like we had to add a more specific delete feature last year that actually captured information about what was getting deleted and how many elements. And that's a pretty interesting one, just because like if it's 5 or 10 elements, no one cares. But people want to be triggered if it's 50 or 100 or 200, because it usually means they've deleted things that they just weren't supposed to. There's a schedule. One of the rows was blank. They hit delete and actually contained 500 elements, or they deleted a bunch of items in a view. So deletion was a really big one, especially at levels and grids and things like that. So those are the things where we more help. The data's already there, but we help capture and monitor that. Interesting ones where a firm telling us, don't worry, no one uses SketchUp in this company. And we started running the tool a week later. There was 25 SketchUp users they weren't aware of. So there's all this sort of getting an understanding of what's actually happening in the group. And it's not about being negative and going hit them with a stick. It's then like, okay, what are these users doing? What's the value they're getting out of these tools? I guess another big win was, we've gotten in flack because we've tried to partner with a couple of other companies to build pipelines for their software, and they haven't been too keen, is because we track concurrent software usage, we're able to determine how many licenses of a particular tool you might need for networking. So one of the companies we're working with, they actually were able to renegotiate one of their software contracts because they had about 35 licenses of this software, and they looked through the last 12 months and went, okay, at most we've only ever had 6 people concurrently using it. So the next year came along, they just said, oh, we'll just take 8 licenses this year. So because we capture information in a lot of different places, it's pretty hard to nail specifics, but they're probably key ones. Another one is a virtual company that uses Virtual and CITRIX, and they do a lot of comparisons between how the CITRIX environment works and how the desktop environment works as well. So getting an understanding of mismatches and performance issues and driver issues and things like that at a pretty granular level.
So what are you finding from the CITRIX level versus the regular desktop level?
It is complicated. I guess it comes down to there's so many factors at play, like where you store things in the elastic layers of CITRIX, and then specifically what type of things you're doing too. So there tends to be certain quirks with certain video card drivers and things like that we discover. So things where we found this really interesting one where Revit was hovering over linked items, and then for some reason in the CITRIX environment, it would start trying to select all of the linked items. But if you were zoomed out on that model and it might say contain 50,000 objects, it would actually go through all 50,000 and just keep spinning. And we're like, why is this doing this? And again, we were able to figure out that it was selecting all those elements actually interactively by capturing that data out of the journal files. So it's mostly about then advising, how do they take that data and, is it better to use this driver or that driver? What's the RAM requirements that people are constantly hitting? What's the desired hard disk space? So things like that is what we're finding for the guys that use the virtual environment.
Are you finding that the virtual environment needs a lot more as far as hardware goes than the physical environment? I've heard that you need twice as much, and some people have said 4 times as much as far as CPU, RAM, and GPU than what the CITRIX says you need, or the VM experts say you need.
It really depends on what the user's doing and their main goals. So if the user's your typical sort of Revit guy, and you've got reasonably good procedures in managing linked files and work sets and things like that, then even 16 gigs okay, unless you're on some really, really big jobs. This particular client has, I'd consider pretty large projects. So, high-rise towers in excess of sort of 1.5 billion Australian, which is, I don't know, about $25 US. No, it's probably... around $1 billion for a single, tower. So with those guys, I guess it's more who you are. So if you're doing the full, you need to aggregate all the subcontractor links and do all that sort of work, then yeah, you need way more than I think some of those users have, 90 or 120 gig of RAM or whatever. But for the typical users, 16 to 32 is pretty good in most cases. It really is the drivers. You've got to be really, really careful with your drivers for your underlying layers and make sure they're right. Otherwise, it just causes havoc. And that does then depend back on the hardware as well. But the problem is it's very hard to sort of buy grid cards from NVIDIA and try 10 different copies of them because they're so expensive and go, oh, that one's not very good. I'll use these ones instead. And the price jumps significantly between them too. So you sort of get locked in after you purchase.
Absolutely. Carl, I bet you have a question.
It's like you read my mind, Bill. But I was going to say, so we're talking about BimBeats, and I've seen some of the things that it can do with the data. I saw a tweet I guess it was probably just before Christmas. Someone was posting a graph, so the data, the dashboard they did, but it was really cool because it showed all of the custom packages from Dynamo and how much use and what nodes out of the packages actually got used, and it's crazy the level of data that it can reach down and grab. Aside from the kudos to being able to do that, is it able to do functions or other things like with once it sees the data, like you get those 50 deleted messages, is it able to do something about that? Other than display the data, like can it stop the process, or can you have it automatically sync something in the middle of the night, or is it just strictly getting you the data to be able to mine it properly?
We have debated so many times about whether we put something into Revit. It's one of those things that because it's this silent thing that sits on everyone's computers, we've made the decision at the moment to not touch anything in Revit. And the main reason being, even as it is right now as a passive listener, the amount of times we get queries saying BimBeats has gone and done this or that or the other to my file service thing, when like it cannot actually perform any transactions is interesting. So we do end up being a convenient scapegoat sometimes when things aren't working right, and we just come back and go, yeah, we don't actually perform any operations on the model. We're read only. There's no way we can do anything. So even if we have an error, the tool is designed just to shut off and go away without interrupting the user in any way, even if it encounters a very slight exception. So that's one of the reasons why we've held off on that space. Where we have seen it go, though, Carl, is like what we see users do is originally we thought that everyone would just jump in and make all these sexy dashboards, and there'd be dashboards everywhere and be all great. But the power users of the tool actually end up sticking in tables and Excel and things like this. And you see them going through, because we can create little analytic tables as well that are all searchable and filterable, and you can save those settings. And we find that the power users just sit in there absorbing the data that way and acting on that. And then the dashboards are only used for either certain types of analysis or essentially to get your opinion across to somebody else. Just because dashboards by themselves are limited to, the functions that the dashboard creator gives you. As soon as you want something beyond that, you have to delve into the data. And what's really nice is our data is all essentially Google search. So if you're just looking for like delete, you just type delete into the search bar, and every record about delete will automatically come up, and you can go and click and filter. So there's no like SQL queries or writing any sort of advancing. You just be like, all right, Carl and delete, and then you can find out how many times Carl has done deletes and then start navigating from there. But what we have built a number of integrations for is for Slack and Teams. So we do have a bunch of templates there where you can just change the query, like, look for delete over 50 elements, or look for file sizes over 250 meg or whatever. And then we post those to Team or Slack channels. So we're finding users sort of use some of the dashboards to determine the variations that they're seeing in the firm, and then basically set your thresholds and start turning those into team actions essentially. But because all the data is in real time, so if someone deletes a level, you'll get notified straight away. And we've had that a few times. People call out, yeah, someone deleted a level they shouldn't have. We got notified straight away, and we were able to tell that person before they hit sync. Or it pops up in their own team thing and lets them know, hey, you just deleted this level. Please undo and don't save and go talk to X about resolving this issue. So, and obviously there's times where you want to ignore that stuff too, where it's not relevant, but at least you get the option.
Well, and I think that's one of the cool things, and one of the ways to look at it is it's nice to be able to have an automated workflow in place, but that's not always the right way. So being able to get that instantaneous notification through your method of choice, Teams, Slack, whatever it might need to be, even the dreaded email, we can then have the actual right person for the job go and do what they need to do to validate yes, no, or maybe, and move forward. But I guess that also means that with stepping outside of the BimBeats box and looking at the automation box, that's something that people could come to you for as well. If they need an automation tool, they need an add-in. Where do you kind of draw the line from that side? Can someone reach out to you for a simple add-in? Drawing a blank on an example, or is it more enterprise level solutions, or is there a medium ground, a middle ground?
No, there's no. We solve any problems. We're like I said, we like any sort of challenge around the AEC side of things. So we do Dynamo scripts that are just, or even support on Dynamo scripts. We've got a couple of companies where we literally just have Trello boards, and where I guess they're smaller firms, and where they're Dynamo gurus, I guess, go tos, and they're just like, oh hey, we're having this, and there's this weird Python error, and blah blah blah. And so we'll take on those challenges, which are, you know, essentially sort of hourly or blocks of hours. Up until the biggest stuff we're doing, been running for 3 or 4 years, and is a number of systems all running in AWS, and there's authentication integrations and all sorts of things. So we're quite happy to jump between both. And to your point there with like building it so it integrated back into Revit to do something. Like, we haven't done that integration with BimBeats, but we did just finish one for another client where we built them an orchestration service. So what I mean by that is essentially they've got lots of Revit models that need lots of PDFs that need to be checked and then pushed into other services and things like that. I think there's about 200 models. So we built them a system where essentially you ping a REST point or a point in their cloud, and it goes, oh, okay, I've got to process these 6 or 7 or 20 or 30 Revit models. Therefore, I'm going to need these 25 virtual machines. They all spin up with Revit on them, and then they start processing the model and go, oh, okay, we need to put this on BIM360, this on Procore, boom, 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 and then create ICs, check it, and shut it all down. And sometimes those will do a check, update the revisions, and save that back to the BIM360 file, collaborate files as well. So you could definitely do that with BimBeats because we expose the REST endpoints for that. But we've specifically steered clear because it is complex, and you've really got to know what you're doing. And it's quite easy to destroy Revit files, as you guys know, just by having humans play with them, let alone computers, can wreak a lot more havoc. You know, not setting up a trigger so it starts doing things every 10 seconds can quickly burn files and things like that. So, anything like that we build has rigorous, I guess, testing, and then we usually run at least 4 to 6 weeks of post-production testing because there's always bugs, and you always have a challenge when you're developing anything that people go, oh, we want to solve this problem. And I've got one file where I drew a wall and a window, and that's your test data to make sure that it handles every possible scenario that we might come across. So obviously when we do that type of stuff, it causes havoc. But it's pretty interesting, some of the add-ins. So we just finished one not too long ago. We've got a couple of little tweaks that's in testing at the moment where it generates all the security camera 3D frost rooms. It's fully clash detected for prisons and airports. So you place all your cameras in, and then it's got it breaks it down by pixel and identity and all of that, and then projects all those ranges where it actually hits the floor plans and draws all those as detail regions, and you can move all the cameras and they all update and regenerate all those frost rooms and things like that. And that's really, really fast because doing it with just normal, I've seen a couple of add-ins in there where they build those as sort of as part of the parametric family, but they're very, very slow to iterate and manipulate. Whereas, you know, even a Prism, we can sort of tackle the whole thing in under a minute if you were to edit every camera and readjust it and things like that. So there's some of the add-ons we do. Scaffold generators, temporary work, sort of automated stuff as well. There's some of the things we do, mostly around production. We did do an interesting one recently where you do markups in PDF of architectural files, and then it creates an ETABS model for structural analysis because we realized none of the engineers could use Revit, but they can use Bluebeam. So we thought, we'll just stay there.
Yeah, everybody can use Bluebeam.
Exactly. So, and Bluebeam's all built on the PDF schema. So, and it's all vector. So, it's at the end of the day, it's all dots and lines and points. And as long as you put it on the right layer, you can attach some metadata to that and then move it off and make 3D models out of it.
Right. It's just a complicated system of levers and pulleys.
Pretty much. The horriblest thing about PDF is scale. The scaling in the PDF format and how different companies implement scaling is atrocious.
Yeah, that's what the Doom buggies are for.
Yep.
What's the most common challenge that you solve?
It's a common one.
Big and small.
I would say the most common one we see is Dynamo training still. Even though, there's so many resources out there in the primer and stuff. And like I personally am not huge into training anymore. Maybe I've gotten older, jaded. But luckily, Quack and Matt and a few of the other guys really love the training aspect. I still like to speak at events, but I'm less. Maybe I'm just old. So I still see that quite a lot, even though there's a primer, even though they've got the expertise. We find that Dynamo training is just massive right now. It's like it's hit its thing now, where everyone's trying to get involved. So we're finding ourselves working with larger and larger and larger companies, as opposed to a couple of years ago where you might have a small group and 6 and one guy really was keen to get into it. Now you're seeing it's being implemented at a much higher level in these big companies to create governance and computational rollouts and, what does this look like for the business? So that's probably the most common thing I'm seeing at the moment, which probably isn't very technical. But in terms of then software enterprise side that we're seeing, BIM360 management tools. I think we've built a ton of BIM360 admin tools in the last 6 months for various companies. So we got one company that's managing about 11,000 live BIM360 projects, and they just want to bring people in, add them to like 200 projects automatically, give them the correct rights, and just have this sort of upper level governance of all of these files and the processes within them. So we found ourselves building that type of technology for a few companies now in various implementations. Sometimes they want it web-based, built in their backend. Others want it as a desktop app. So yeah, it's a weird mix and match of essentially the same technology being implemented in various shapes.
Well, and lucky for you, Autodesk has nicely rechanged, revamped, rebranded the entire BIM360 lineup this week. So
why?
you get a whole new, now it's Autodesk Docs and Autodesk BIM Collaboration and BIM Collaboration Pro. And
they're forging ahead.
It's
as soon as you get used to calling it something, they have to rip the rug from under you, and have to get used to calling it something new. Just their way of doing things.
Well, at least now the products have individual names for the most part, because the hardest part is when people say, "I'm working with BIM360." Okay, which of the multiple products?
Which of the 360 products are you working with?
Yeah, exactly. So I think this is going to be a good thing, and they're integrating some of the products together. So BIM360 Build and PlanGrid are now together in Autodesk Build. So they're slowly merging products, making things together.
Making it more interesting.
Well, I think it's all part of the Autodesk Construction Cloud is like the umbrella, right?
Yeah.
And then the Autodesk Connected Construction is ACCC, the workflow solution. We've had to do a few implementations of that recently as well. So have you guys seen that?
No.
So it's
Tell me more.
Basically, they've built a bunch of BIM360 and Forge pieces, as well as done an Autodesk version of a product called Wicado. So we've been working with Autodesk with a few customers now. So essentially, it's like a node-based Webflow application. I've only seen it so far with sort of probably the enterprise customers. But essentially, it's like, hey, I've got a bunch of files in SharePoint. I want to create a recipe so I can move them to BIM360, and I've got some data in BIM360. I want to move it to Aconex, and so you can start again. So you don't need, the software boffins like us. You can go and craft essentially your own recipes by dropping these flows of information. So a little bit like Dynamo and so on, but for the web. So you could connect Excel to Microsoft 360 to SharePoint to calendars to BIM360, all of that type of thing, just through these sort of solutions. So it's pretty powerful, but it's similar to Dynamo. So the reason we get called in is, one, you've got to know a little bit about REST and HTTP protocols and some of that stuff to understand the data flows. but two, there's just essentially missing nodes. And so as soon as you want that more advanced functionality, you've either got to write it yourself or get someone to write it. But it is good because you just write the pieces. So again, you write, a single component in the flow, and then the team can take that and use that in the other recipes. So it's not that idea of the giant black box. It's more we write, one little cog is a black box, and they can use that cog in other areas of the system without necessarily having to worry about the details of it. So it is an interesting product.
So one of the challenges that we're having these days, and maybe you can help solve this, is we'd like to have an easy way for a team to add someone to a 360 project without involving the IT department.
So that's literally what we've been building for people, what I was saying before. So the implementations have been for that is exactly what you said. The typical process we're seeing in companies is you email somebody, and then hopefully he gets back to you that day or the next day if he's not busy. Mm-hmm. Then he stuffs around and he might not get it all right because he doesn't understand all the variables in it. And then, adding people and so on. So that's exactly the thing that we've been building on the Forge side is various ways of controlling users and then project control. So we're about to start one where the company has a SharePoint form that they use already for their Microsoft SharePoint, so it creates a project there. So we're going to use the same form, but then we'll grab the information out of that and create a little custom app that goes and creates a project based on that same data. So for the end user, they just go and fill out the same information, add the users, the project, and all of that, and then they just tick, I need this on SharePoint and I need this on BIM360. And another one we did was just a simple web form. So the client logs into their because we deploy these things usually on the client's cloud. We find most corporate AEC firms are using Microsoft. They're already there, so we just roll it up in their Azure cloud. Create a simple web form. So you just go to that, type all the values in, and it spits out the BIM360 project on the other side and alerts the people with the email when it's done. So just takes away any of that IT work. And then it's just down to how far you want to go with that beyond that. So for another company, we wrote a tool that actually runs through all their active projects and checks all the file names, meet convention, and the folder structure is correct, and starts alerting non-compliant folders and file structures to management. Same with things like folder depth. As maybe you noticed or not noticed, sometimes navigating BIM360 is a tad slow compared to Windows Explorer. So, you come across firms where they're buried 3 files in like 11 folders deep hierarchy and things like that. So, so just some of that compliance too. So you get that data back and have an idea. And we've got some of that now in BimBeats. So BimBeats, we've got a bit of an activity register where you can connect to your BIM360 hub and it'll let you know who's logging in, who's working in what projects, what files are being added, what files are being deleted, all of that type of stuff. So you just get a bit of a register of activity. So you know what files, projects to archive, things like that.
Cool. We will be in contact.
Cool. So, yeah.
That was easy.
So, I think that's all the major stuff.
No. What else are you working in terms of some things that you're doing with Forge outside of, some of the user access and things?
Probably the 2 coolest things we've done on Forge recently was, and they're mostly around the viewer. So we built 3 probably really, really cool viewers. One is one for mechanical contractor where they can update. Just in the normal Forge viewer, you can quickly select all your pipes and runs and change the statuses and set them up for materials auditing, and you can do it from the 2D plans as well. So there's all sorts of things where you can grab things by spools and it'll auto dimension all the spools and you can reassign them. So I know there's a couple of other apps. I think Get the Point has something a little bit similar, but this is obviously very bespoke to the company's way of doing things. There's obviously the trade-off between bespoke and commercial software. So that was interesting. The last one that we finished that we were a part of is actually a house configurator. So we sort of helped with the concept with a couple of others and with Autodesk, where essentially you could go into a house and you could pick different kitchen layouts and things like that. And so you'd process all the Revit families in a certain way and they all load in and out of the model. So you get the the kitchen that you want, and you can have your different, luxury or economic packages. I'm not sure if you have similar things in the States where you buy, these sort of volume homes, and you can pick the different finishes and the different, ovens and so on. When you during the purchasing process, so making that a web-based experience, all within the Forge app was pretty cool. And then another one, we just built a 2D takeoff tool. So I know Autodesk has Assemble, and you guys might have seen that quantity takeoff. But one of the things I know they're working on it, but still currently missing is a 2D takeoff, because there's a lot of things that quantity surveyors and people who do quantity extractions just want to take off 2D information as well. So, highlighting areas where cornices might be, even though the cornices or skirting might not have been modeled, and wet areas. So just allowing you to draw all these annotations that get linked to their cost database. So it gets the live costings and brings that into the Forge model as well. So you get an up-to-date, accurate purchasing understanding of that home and the changes the client's made to it. So that's been one of the more interesting ones, because by default, the Forge viewer doesn't really have this ability to, change file. You can't just select an oven and go, I want it to be something else, like a family in Revit or something, because they're all just meshes. So you got to get quite creative in how you approach swapping things in and out at that object level, and creating all these options under the hood, while still making it viable for the team. It's actually building all these Revit models to just sort of send them off to be processed, so there's not a lot of double handling of the information. So it's not like you have to grab each family and process it each time. So that's been probably with some of the more interesting stuff we've been doing on that side of things. And then from a purely technical, nerdy point of view, the orchestration engine was pretty cool, just having all these different virtual machines of Revit fire up basing on the need that's required by the organization, and then shutting down when they finish. Because you've got design automation that Autodesk has, but one of the problems with that is you can't save back to BIM360 yet. So you can't open a design collaboration file, perform a check, maybe update some data if it's incorrectly put, and then save that back in, which is one of the key needs. So being able to orchestrate that yourself, obviously not only allows you to do Revit, but then you can set up things. We ended up setting in an IFC and an AutoCAD and a Navisworks on the same platform too. So it doesn't just fire up Revit. You can then have it open up the Navis, combine all that, process that, and sort of create this like cascading effect all within your own cloud services. So and the maturity of the cloud services just make it so much more reachable. These aren't, 6 figures of software development anymore to achieve this level, because Microsoft and AWS have done so much heavy lifting with all the bits and pieces and how they talk to each other. So they're a lot cheaper now to even build, if that's something you're even considering. It really isn't like what it was 5 or 10 years ago, where these things were quite hard to build.
Absolutely. Dana, I'm sure you have a great final thought.
Well, I just I forget where I saw it, but I saw that you had a nudge tracker somewhere.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether it was on BimBeats or on another Twitter website. I one of your many links saw it, and I definitely got a chuckle, because I dated someone who was a Revit user, and they would nudge model elements like to get the wall where they wanted. They would like use the arrow keys, and I would like have a panic attack sitting next to them. Like I can't Revit next to you. Like I need to move.
I can't Revit next to you.
So I definitely got a chuckle out of that. So
yeah, well, that was actually Conrad, so I got to give him that. So we were working with one of the clients, and we got access to their database to do some tweaks to it. And I can't remember why we started looking at Nudge, but we looked at it, and there was like one guy, or I won't say guy, because it definitely might not have been a guy, but 7. It was 75,000 nudges in like 3 months or something. And we were just thinking of the costs related to it. So Conrad went and did up a cheeky little one just on in our own platform of how much these things cost, right? Because they are important.
Like in construction, when nothing is to an actual dimension, right? And like they're going to actually build it and they can't. Like, oh my gosh.
Yeah,
like that's exponential costs right there.
Wouldn't
I
the
guess
contractor just nudge it into place then?
That's what the subbies end up. Yeah, that's what they usually have to end up doing, isn't it? So, but yeah, they're interesting questions. Like, what's better? Is it better to be a keyboard user, keyboard shortcuts, or tabs? And then what's your top 10 commands that people are always using in the ribbon that should be keyboard shortcuts? Like, they don't account to much by themselves, but they really add up, especially when you see the time discrepancies, like clicking on a panel, clicking on a sub-panel or something in the Revit interface, versus the keyboard shortcuts. Like some of those type of exercises we encourage people to undertake. It's not about coming up with 150 commands, but what's the top 10? Finish. Assigning everything to like whether you're finishing a group or finishing a sketch or something like that. Like that's one of the key ones where I go, everyone just assign them all to the same command shortcut. So you're not having to go chase that stupid little finish button down. You just F spacebar or whatever. So yeah,
I can just hear the conversation now with the nudge guy going, "Oh, you have a programmer? Can you make it so I can do the shift arrow key and it nudges 10 times for me instead of 1?" Like a super nudge? More of a shove?
Well, if you just zoom out, I guess it actually does like the 10 times the nudge, Like it's just a matter of zoom.
Accurate. It's not as accurate.
Nudge is valuable too. Like we did this experiment 6 or 8 months ago, and we were trying to come up with a machine learning reinforcement way. This is when we were just playing around with it. Might have been a bit longer, to figure out how to get columns to place themselves in the right position. And we were stuffing around with the whole, okay, well, let's create a move, and then how does an object know how to move itself relative to the other move? And that was horrible. It is really hard to do machine learning models train on that. And so we ended up just going, well, let's just put postable commands of nudge up, down, left, and right, and then combine that with the zoom, because the zoom moves in your 10 or 100 mil or whatever increments. And it was actually quite effective for moving the columns around the scene using machine learning, just with using the nudge command. So it has its place, but I would recommend that only neural networks use it.
Well, and like I said, I specifically said model elements. I think, nudging an annotation here or there, I'm not going to bring out the ruler to slap your wrist, but.
Well, there's no finesse to that, right? Because what's the exact location a tag should be relative to an element? Yeah. No, I totally agree. So, yeah, but nudging itself.
Especially if you have like all 20 tags selected and you're nudging them together, then, we're getting somewhere.
Yes, then you get it. And that's the difference. How do you drill down into those things? So, there's 75,000 nudges. And I don't think we drilled down. We just had a laugh that the guy loves the arrow keys. But yeah,
how do you even propose that to the client? Like, okay, so just so you know, like,
well, yeah, clients usually with BimBeats, because it's so vast, they've always contacted us because it's like one specific thing the product does, and because we've only been selling it now, like literally on the market outside of the early pilots for 12 or 13 months. So the clients that we've got are still in the process of like they're using it for certain things, and they're only just sort of starting to expand it. And some of them interesting ways. Like we've got one client who tracks users in Revit out of hours and compounds that to help add that as a metric, as where they want to go with it is, stress on employees as well. So understanding when people are working out of hours, but then how often is that occurring over a week, a month, a year, and can they put in place? Obviously, overworking is one problem, but then and Revit's only one part of what people do, but for most Revit users, especially if you're in the deeper technical levels, you're probably in it 70%, 80% of your billable time, right? So there are these interesting questions of, okay, can we look at employees working out of hours constantly, and then track them and make sure that they're okay, and or people, getting in board with Dynamo and being able to follow them up directly, because we can see that they keep having errors every time they run their scripts and things like this. So there's this other aspect to it where we're probably only just delving the depths. We really spent the last year working on the pipelines and making them really stable, and now we're creating way too much information. So now it's the much harder task, I think, is like, what are all these things that are valuable to companies at a Revit technical level, like someone deleted my level, at a business sort of BIM manager level, like how many hours a week are going into my models, and this section, what was the total time to create this section, and how do we compare that to other sections to get a sort of medium understanding of how long these things are taken. And then at the strategic level, like, okay, what are the entire commands that user used last year compared to this year? In their Revit skill set, has it grown? Has it progressed? Has their Dynamo and Grasshopper skill sets progressed as well? And it's not about using those as single decisions, but they are perfectly valid metrics to understand from a technical level how users have grown. Not just like, oh yeah, I play in Dynamo now. It's much more what's the right word there? Discreet maybe, but yeah, it's really obvious. You can narrow down to specifically what people are doing. It's less wishy-washy, I guess, and gut feel.
Yeah.
So what's the best way that people can get a hold of you if they want to talk more about how you can benefit them? Because there's just so many ways that you can, right? Just like you're hiring a data scientist to come essentially, right? If you don't have one on staff, you can outsource it.
Yeah, like all of those things. If you don't have good Dynamo guys or the software side of it, we can help on that front. Easiest way to contact us, if it's BimBeats related, just go to BimBeats.com and hit the contact button. That's the easiest way there. If it's me directly, just look me up, Adam Sheather on Twitter. Oh, sorry. At Jataco on Twitter, and then on LinkedIn. I'm always on LinkedIn, snooping around, getting messages. So just Adam Sheather on LinkedIn. And if you need my direct email, it's just adam.sheather@automation.co, not .com. We couldn't get the .com. We still get an email every week from some guy trying to sell it to us for like $30,000 or something silly.
Oh my
goodness.
We'll make sure all of those are available down below. So check out the comments if you want to get in touch with them. Check out what they have to offer, because it is a vast amount of things that will definitely help you analyze what's going on better.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Adam.
No worries, guys. Thanks for the chat, and appreciate being on.
Yeah, I had a good time.
Indeed. Looking forward to catching up, hopefully in person again in maybe a year or so.
Maybe so, maybe sooner. Who knows? Carl, thank you. Dana, thank you. Listener, thank you.